everybody. What's happening? This is the Just Ballin Sports Podcast here with JB. I'm Jordan Bradford, and I'm here with Jeff Beck. We're your co-hosts of this podcast, and we're really looking forward to talking some sports today and continuing to do that with you guys for the next, many weeks. So we're going to be here every week. But first, I thought we'd introduce ourselves and talk a little bit about the format of the pod. Jeff, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, Jeff Beck here. I guess I'll kind of intro us both. I mean, a couple of financial advisors here. Enjoy playing sports, watching sports, betting on sports. Now we're going to talk about sports a little bit. So,
yeah,
a couple Division III athletes, a little baseball, a little basketball. So, not that high up in the rankings, but hey, we got a little experience and we've seen a thing or two, so we got some stuff to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Division III athletes, shout out to Chicago's Danny Parkins, who just wrote that book, Pipeline to the Pros, about how all these D3 athletes, coaches, and whatnot kind of rose through the ranks in the NBA. So I think that's kind of, I would say that's the reason why we're doing this. We're trying to make it big.
Yeah, no question. There's a lot of Division III people that are kind of under the radar and make big things happen. So you never know where you can go if you're working hard, get your name out there and do some stuff. So yeah, we're gonna try and do the same thing here.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's talk format here real quick. So for our listeners, I think how we're going to start this podcast off at least is we're going to have it split up into two parts. The first part, I think we're just going to talk about maybe the biggest stories in sports, what's happened over the last week. Our goal is to get one of these out every week. So, a lot's going to happen, I'm sure. And we're going to try to cover what we think is the biggest stories, the coolest stories, just, stuff that people want to hear more information about, or honestly, just kind of the stuff we want to talk about. And
yeah, honestly, I mean, whatever, we enjoy, we hope other people enjoy a little bit, and, we're going to talk about, I assume it'll be stuff that, people are interested in, our popular topics. But yeah, with, 45 minutes to an hour, we can only fit so much stuff in. So we'll try and hit the high points, of course.
Yeah. And when we get to the second part, we'll focus maybe a little bit more on some stories that either aren't getting as much attention, or maybe even some potential overreactions that we see out there. One way or the other. Maybe it's us. Maybe we want to overreact to something. Maybe we feel like everybody else is overreacting to something that isn't that big of a deal. But we're going to touch on some different storylines there. We're also going to talk a little bit of gambling, of course, as Jeff mentioned. We're going to talk about some bets that we like, and hopefully give you some great advice. And this is not considered financial advice. I think we should make a disclaimer that says that. But that being said, these are locks.
yeah, definitely a lock. Absolutely, share them with your friends. Throw the money on it. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get this started. So first things first, let's just say, what are we not talking about this week? And, a couple of things we're not going to talk about is Florida State football, because they are not back, apparently. Don't know what happened to them, but this is ugly. And honestly, we don't have time to talk about them.
Yeah, I mean, even though we don't have time to talk about it, I do have a few things to say about it, unfortunately, that's just how some of these things go. But, last year not making the playoff, hearing the fans, I understood where they're coming from, but, that's part of the rules. Major injury to a quarterback, you're not going to make it in there. We were unbiased, right? We have no horse in the race with any of those teams. You don't make it, blown out by Georgia, and then you start, 0-2 on the year to two unranked opponents. Not a good look for them.
Yeah, I mean, basically we're seeing what we would have seen had they made the playoffs last year, which is no quarterback play. And that's what they're getting now, and I think they paid a pretty penny for it. But, moving on, another topic we're not going to really spend much time on, but one that we really like is the PGA Tour. And the season just officially ended a couple weeks ago. Scottie Scheffler's the champ, of course. I mean, I think we all kind of saw that coming. Even though Xander gave him a little run for his money there at the end of the year, Scottie had an outstanding season.
Yeah, quite a two-man race, actually, that it turned out to be. But, one of those seasons, every time you pull up the DraftKings or something each week, it's hard not to put your money on Scottie. And, it was one of those things people talking about, it's a Tiger-ish year, and people getting really defensive. And I get we all love Tiger, amazing. And nobody's saying he is better than Tiger, or that one season that he had was better than any one season Tiger had. I think you can say it's Tiger-ish, 16 top 10s, 8 wins, the Masters, the Players, gold medal, and then win it in the Tour Championship. I mean, obviously the money's gone up, but you finished the year making over $60 million. It's hard not to talk about and hard not to say it's a Tiger-ish year.
Yeah, pretty solid year financially for him. Hopefully he's got a good financial advisor helping him out.
Yeah. If you need one, Scotty, feel free to reach out. JB's
That's right.
here.
We'll put our contact info in. So Scotty only, though. We don't need anybody else.
Yeah, that'll cover it.
What else we're not talking about? Cubs threw a no-hitter last week. We're both Chicago guys, even though I live in Tulsa now and Jeff lives in the suburbs of Chicago. We love the Cubs, but unfortunately, a combined no-hitter doesn't count. So we're not going to talk about that one.
Got to leave your guy in if he's throwing a no-hitter. I don't care if it's the third inning, eighth, you got to keep him going. No-hitters, you got to keep him going.
Yeah, I don't care if he's on the verge of getting Tommy John surgery mid-game.
You can see it. Just keep going. You gotta.
You're not pulling me in the middle of a no-hitter, that's for sure. And then lastly, Tyreek Hill detained on his way to Hard Rock Stadium.
Jeez.
Now, I saw this online, but it sounds like getting arrested before your sporting event is the new flu game because Tyreek went off.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah, that's insane. I think they call it the law enforcement game instead of the flu game.
The law enforcement game.
Yeah.
I love it.
I saw. It's awesome.
Yeah, so anyway, that's what we're not talking about this week. So let's jump into what we are talking about. Let's kick it off. I mean, week 1 of the NFL season. Let's square one, game 1. Jeff, what do you think? What did you learn from Chiefs-Ravens Thursday night?
I mean, it was a great game. Awesome game to kick off the season. That's for sure. Obviously, a lot of hype around it. Seeing that rematch from the end of last year. I think it showed me a couple things. Even though it's early in the season, right? You never want to overreact or underreact to things that you see, but I think for the Chiefs, they're highly motivated to three-peat. It's hard to probably look back on any team that had that chance and think they weren't motivated. But just it seems like there's something different about them. What I really liked is, it didn't feel like the offense played a spectacular game by any means, but that defense is really something. So that was huge. I think the Chiefs really have a good shot at running back. It also showed me a little bit that, I think the Ravens did maybe take a little bit of a step back. I'm a big Lamar fan. Seems like a great guy. Love the character. Obviously love the spectacular nature of his game. But at the end of the game there were a couple throws. Everybody saw him in the back of the end zone. That was the Zay Flowers, I think, that he really missed.
That was rough.
But even before that, he had Isaiah Likely going to the corner that he had a chance, I thought, to throw a pretty good ball there, at least give him an opportunity, and he missed that. And to me, again, it's week 1, you get it, but it's kind of becoming a trend now for Lamar and the Ravens, and it's just something, Mahomes, no matter how bad the game looks, he ends up pulling those out, and you saw the Ravens kind of do the opposite. So, long season, but I give the Chiefs a really good chance to make a run, and Baltimore, they definitely took a step back, in my opinion, personally.
Yeah, I mean, I can't fault you for looking at it that way. I mean, I think we have a similar viewpoint on the Ravens. I would maybe say that I wasn't as high on them last year as a lot of folks were. I mean, I knew Lamar won the MVP, of course, but if you look across the board, last year was a pretty mediocre year for the star quarterbacks. I mean, you had between injuries and just, Mahomes had a pretty unremarkable season statistically.
Well, halfway through the year, they were trying to find an MVP, and you couldn't find one.
Yeah.
It was like they just kept
looking at running
off.
backs.
Yeah, seriously.
I mean, it's crazy. So, I think that the Ravens, I think Lamar is great, right? I think he's probably the most single exciting player in the National Football League. Just, every time he snaps the ball, he could do anything on the field. Mm-hmm. But I also think that as great of his play as he can showcase for us on TV, and on Sundays there, I think he might be the ceiling for the Ravens, and he might be the guy, because at the end of the day, it's those passes at the end of a game that you've got to hit. And I get that he hit the Isaiah Likely pass at the very end, and if Likely's wearing like a half a size shoe, smaller, that's a touchdown, and they probably win the game. But when you miss on those wide open plays, I mean, those are the ones that haunt you, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, you never know. The pressure situation or the pressure conversation is always an interesting one to me, because you never really know what's going through a player's head. You can see results, but I say on the golf course, making a 10-footer to win the match. What's my chance of making a 10-footer at any given moment? Am I missing it because of pressure? Or am I missing it simply because I'm 50% from 10-foot putts? Maybe, probably worse,
Right.
probably 30%.
Yeah.
What is the reason that I'm missing it? So that is a tough thing for me. But I will say, you watch him throughout the game, and he look like he's just flipping the ball around, like he's having fun. It's like it's a toy. Like you could tell he can throw that ball far, and he can throw it pretty accurate, and he looks like he's doing it all game. And then you just see those moments at the end of the game when it really matters, and it's just not there. And again, you see the flip side with guys like Mahomes or Tom Brady, where maybe the whole game's not going their way, but at the end of the game, when they need that drive, when they need to score, they're somehow putting it where it needs to go. And again, you hate to dog on him because he seems like a great guy. He's a super exciting player to watch. But yeah, unfortunately, it's becoming a little bit more of a trend than a one-off. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, and if you look at even the roster construction there and between Baltimore and Kansas City, look what Kansas City did in the offseason. They went out and got Xavier Worthy, who, yeah, he's a small dude, but he was custom built for the Kansas City Chiefs offense. I mean, he's a jet sweep guy. He's so fast. You get him out in space. You get some blockers in front of him, and he just makes dudes miss. And they put that with Mahomes because Mahomes is the greatest distributor of the football that we have right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's a weapon that, people were a little skeptical on just of his size, which is understandable. But with Mahomes, if they use him the right way, the conversation was like he didn't get touched on any of those touchdowns that he had. He literally on the jet sweep or the little toss they had to him didn't get touched. Obviously, the other one was a little bit of a blown coverage. But again, how much of that is the speed that he's bringing to the table? I think Rashid Rice was underrated all last year. Nick Wright was super high on him all year long, talking about him. And you could see that guy is a strong receiver. He's catching the ball in the middle of the field. I think he was pretty underrated last year. And, again, we'll see the offseason stuff when and if that impacts him, in games. But with him doing that, Xavier Worthy, and then still got Hollywood Brown, who wasn't out there, And again, not saying he's a top 5 receiver in the league, but speed. And Mahomes makes everybody better. So regardless of what they've done in past situations, when you have Mahomes now, you have to think a little bit more highly of him, I'd say.
Yeah. And if I look at the Baltimore Ravens and what they're doing, right? I mean, do I think Derrick Henry's got something left in the tank? Maybe. He's defied odds the last handful of years, leading the league in rushing as many times as he has, and he just seems like he just never wears down. But if I'm Baltimore, do I need another runner of the football? I mean, that's what we already do great. If I'm Baltimore, I'm looking for more weapons that you can get out in space for Lamar.
Yeah.
More wide receivers. I mean, I think Zay Flowers is a pretty good receiver, but I think he's going to struggle in that offense because he's going to see the best corner and double coverage a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't know that he's good enough to overcome that. And especially if Lamar is going to miss him on some big plays, that's one of those quarterback receiver kind of controversies that you could kind of see that building up over time. And maybe 2 years from now, Zay Flowers is, wanting out of Baltimore because it's just not the greatest fit for him.
Yeah,
I blame some of that on the organization.
No question about it. I mean, yeah, you wonder where people kind of hit their breaking point on some of those things and where they start to put blame. Watching last night's game, Monday night game, 49ers Jets, and even just seeing the first couple plays with Aaron Rodgers and someone dropping a pass and doing that stuff. It's hard not to, no matter how much of a team player you are, to not feel some frustration inside you when you're thinking you're one level and things aren't working out. And obviously, as the receiver, it's the most dependent position, right, on another person or other people on your team to be successful. And we know receivers tend to be a little bit more centric, a little more emotional, maybe I'd say. And so, yeah, who knows? I mean, I think because, again, the character of Lamar and who he is, who he appears to be, I think his teammates want to be with him, really want to see him succeed as well. But, yeah, you wonder at some point in time, I mean, if things aren't working and you're missing a lot of those open shots, does he get frustrated? Does he get sick of hearing other receivers above him when he thinks he could be something like that? So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to have a hard time getting paid. He's going to have a hard time getting paid if he only puts up 800 yards of receiving in a year, or it's going to be tough sledding for him.
No question.
Another topic I wanted to bring up was, of course, Caleb Williams and the Bears. What do we make of the Bears after week 1 of the Caleb Williams era? Because it's here.
Yeah, it's here. I think, you can feel the excitement watching the game. I mean, the first, quarter was just the fans are electric, watching every play, every snap. Clearly there's, a buzz. Hard not to watch that game and look at that and say, okay, wasn't incredibly impressive. But again, it is one game. So, that's, I think, what's tough about a lot of these games is you don't want to be too high, you don't want to be too low. I liked his demeanor and stuff after the game. If you watched, his interviews and talking about it, I think he was incredibly complimentary of the other facets of their team, special teams, defense. Obviously, that's that won them the game. So you'd love to hear that from him. And I think he took ownership, that it was a rough game. It wasn't what he expected. It wasn't what he wanted to come in. Throwing under 50% completions and less than 100 yards. I don't care who you are. That's underwhelming. And to be the number one pick, hyped as much as you are, clearly, not what he wanted to see. But, the flip side of that is, you get the win. You get the win. You know that your defense can carry you in a tough game. Now, the Titans aren't, the greatest competition, and Will Levis may have handed them a couple balls. But, that defense is legit. That defense is legit, I think. And, I think they're going to be able to keep him in games early on as he's figuring it out. And I've looked at the schedule and stuff. The front side of the schedule, I think, is a little bit easier for him. So I think, as he's working through some of these things, as he's gelling with receivers, getting used to the speed of the NFL, if that defense can keep them in games, win them some games, and he can make a play or two to keep a nice record throughout, the first part of the season, I'm still very high on, I'm very excited about, what their potential is. I think they can still, make a, with Jordan Love's injury in Green Bay, Lions look good, but, I think they can definitely make a run for the division still, for sure.
Yeah, obviously the best result is a win, always. But, I looked at the game, and even as I was watching it, I felt like, he wasn't playing his best. He admitted it afterwards. I don't think it was really a secret or something that anyone expected that he would feel differently even.
Yeah.
But, if you look at, he misses a big pass to Keenan Allen on the second drive of the game. They got the two great starting positions.
True.
Keenan Allen makes a great double move. And I think, Caleb probably a little amped up, first NFL game. His dude's wide open. And he just sails it over his head. That's, that could have been a touchdown right there.
Yeah.
And, that could have changed the entire trajectory of that game. Because, as in sports, as soon as one thing goes your way, especially in those tight moments or those big moments, you start to feel like, okay, I'm settled in. Like, this is just another day at the office.
Absolutely.
And, he was close to getting one there. Keenan Allen also dropped that one in the end
touchdown,
zone, and that was very uncharacteristic of Keenan Allen.
That was a great throw to him. Great play. And to drop ball, and it happens. But, that was one that could have changed what we thought of the game for sure if he catches
it could have been 2 touchdowns for Caleb instead of no touchdowns, and then he could have had $150 in yards too, and by the end of it you're like, that's a pretty good
decent game.
Pretty good rookie game one
with no turnovers. You'll take
no
that
turnovers,
every time.
and I don't think people are giving him enough credit either.
Agreed.
Again, he did not play a great game, but at the end of the game he did lead them down the field for a field goal. That was a big field goal there in the fourth quarter, and he did not turn the ball over.
Yeah.
And that is if you have one way to win football games in the NFL, it is win the turnover battle.
Absolutely.
And with a defense like they've got, don't turn the ball over, Caleb, and you're gonna have a lot of wins on the season.
No question. Yeah. I think there's a lot of positives to take away from it. Again, with the hype that came with it, it's hard to, say anything super positive about his individual performance, but again, I think as a team, as a Bears fan, as someone who's rooting for them to do well, I think there's plenty positives to take away from it. Exciting stuff to look forward to for the season for sure.
Yeah. Well, what about changing gears here a little bit? What about college football? So obviously a lot of new changes in college football in 2024. We got the 12-team playoff, conference realignment. They're adding the 2-minute timeout, which, if you've been listening, they've been making it very clear it is not a 2-minute warning. So I may have missed something, but it sounds like the NFL sent them a letter telling them they can't call it a 2-minute warning, which
it's funny you say that. I didn't even really, I'm not always up and up on all the new rules of any sport, to be honest with you. But yeah, I heard that mentioned like multiple times in games, and I was kind of like, why do they keep saying it like that? It didn't trigger in my mind that was probably why. Yeah.
Yeah, super weird to me, but like anything else, I'm sure eventually it'll just be part of our vernacular. But
Yeah.
yeah, 2 minute timeout. So getting closer and closer to NFL style rules, which I like. I mean, just keep the rules as uniform as possible. It's always kind of bothered me that college basketball is two halves, even though high school is 4 quarters and the NBA is 4 quarters. Like, I don't understand the reason to change up the actual play of
Well,
game.
especially when you change that, I always thought like the 3 point line in college basketball as well. Playing it was like you had these guys who were 6'7" guards shooting from a high school 3 point line. It was like
Yeah.
a layup to them, and then they have to jump to the NBA. It was like, why don't we gradually increase it? And they finally have, which is good. But baseball, similar thing. Is there nothing between a metal bat and a wood bat maybe that we can get them introduced to? I mean, come on, they gotta warm up to where they're getting to, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. So with all these new rule changes in college football, and a couple weeks of the season are in, what are your thoughts? Anything stick out to you? Have you learned anything that you didn't know going into the season?
I didn't think there was anything too, spectacular that stood out, but I was impressed. I mean, we talked earlier a little bit about, Alabama. I was impressed to see that. I mean, again, early on with these teams, they're scheduling some obviously weaker opponents. The expectation is that you blow them out, right? When the spread is 50 points, 55 points, that's the expectation. But, it reminds me of, handicap in golf or your index in golf. That's your expectation, but that's actually a good round. To perform to that means you actually played really well. So, when those teams come out there, it's hard to stay motivated against an inferior opponent for that entire time, right? So, I mean, to actually step on the gas, do that, come out and play that way, is impressive. It's what's expected, but it's impressive at the same time. So, I thought those 2 wins were good with the new coach, Kalen DeBoer. I mean, I'm excited. Usually after a big coach leaves, the greatest coach possibly ever,
Yeah.
the expectation is a fall off. I like what I see so far, so I'm excited to kind of see what they're able to do throughout the season, if they can continue on this road and make some noise at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kalen did about as good of a job as anybody the last couple of years in college football, especially last year. That Washington team, while they had a great quarterback and they had a great wide receiver room, they clearly overachieved, getting all the way to the national championship game. And, I know that it wasn't the closest game in the world, but, it was competitive for a lot of the game.
Absolutely.
And they were within a couple plays from making that a different outcome potentially. I give Kalen DeBoer a lot of credit, and I think Bama is. If you're a Bama fan, I think that you've got to be just jacked up because you went from Saban, who is.
Yeah.
I think the greatest college football coach of all time.
Yeah.
And especially when you think about, having done that in recency, with a lot more social media and just everything that, plays into that, it's harder to have sustained success, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a lot of ways, especially in a team sport because there's just so many distractions. So you go from Nick Saban, who just wins all the time, to, maybe the best offensive mind in college football, and that's going to be a little bit of a shift, and certainly will take some time to get things rolling exactly how they want. But I like what I see from them. I know this last week, Bama didn't look great for most of the game. They were only up by 1 going into the fourth quarter, but then they won the fourth quarter 28-3. So clearly they've got it in them. And if you look at like what happened to OU was playing Houston, and that game was supposed to be a huge blowout, and they won by 1 point. That was a close game. Yeah. And they could never pull away. So, I look at those two programs and I say, well, I'd much rather be where Alabama is. They're much further down the line. I think they've clearly got the right coach. I think Jalen Milroe is fantastic.
Throw the ball, yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I said, you look at those with those big spreads. I mean, there's an expectation to do, and I mean, that almost brings a little more pressure on. It's not just win the game; it's you have to win by 40. You have to win by 30. Yeah. If you win by a touchdown, nobody's impressed. Nobody's happy with that. And so, yeah, even if it takes a little while to get going, takes a little while to motivate people to figure out what they're doing. I mean, those teams, that's a highlight of their year. A lot of times at the beginning of the season, getting to play these big programs. And you look at, one of the other big things I know is like Notre Dame. you look at them. I gotta mention them. My brother-in-law is a big fan of Notre Dame, and they get that big win the first week, which was huge. Everybody was high on that. And then, in my opinion, kind of typical Notre Dame fashion lately. I mean,
Yeah.
to snub, NIU, I think it's a great program, obviously, fairly local for us. But yeah, I mean, they pay him $1.4 million to come play them. They think that's a game where let's put on a show. Let's make that statement. Let's win by a nice margin. And you lose that. That's the flip side to, having a great fourth quarter and winning still by a decent margin versus actually end up losing the game.
Yeah. And I mean, Notre Dame, man, I want to root for them so bad because I love schools with great tradition and history, and the uniforms are clean because they are just the OGs. But every time I want to root for them, they go and do something like this. They get beat by NIU at home. And I mean, I'm happy for NIU. I think that's awesome. It's great when these small programs can go in and beat a big team, and especially when they do it on their turf like that. That's awesome. But if you're a Notre Dame fan, you probably have to go 11-1 now because that's a very bad loss, and that Texas A&M win might not be looking so great. All things considered, I mean, Texas A&M could go 6-6 in the SEC, and now that win looks like, you went into a big environment and a rowdy crowd, but you beat a team that is 6-6 and doesn't even make a bowl game.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think Notre Dame's got a lot of soul searching to do on the offensive side of the football.
Yeah, I agree completely. And to your point, I mean, the other big thing that I was thinking about, just with you mentioned playing, some in the SEC at the end, like with the, shift in some of these conferences and stuff, I think it's obviously pretty clear we got the top conferences, and that's where stuff's coming from. I think most of us are high on, the 12-team playoff versus just the 4, the original, bowl games. But it's going to be interesting. I mean, as I'm looking not only at the winners from the first couple weeks, but then, kind of checking the conferences where they're at. I mean, the SEC, obviously the Big Ten, has their spots as well. But, I mean, I look at some of those teams. I could see the SEC, having the top 5 spots, wouldn't shock me. I mean, again, I know you have your Ohio States and, Oregon, Penn State. They're, big, they're going to make some, and you never know how things will play out, and people can have some bad things can happen. But, you mentioned Tennessee. I mean, there's some teams that I think can really make noise. And just, I guess for me, to be curious to see, one, how the 12-team playoff goes, what that actually ends up looking like, kind of the fan engagement. Is it as fun as we're thinking it's going to be? Are we going to catch a bunch of dud games early on? And 2, is it just end up being the SEC Big Ten showdown kind of thing, year after, how quickly will they pivot from it if it turns into something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a little bit of both. I do think it's going to end up being an SEC Big Ten showdown. I think there's no way around it. I mean, if anything, I think going from 4 to 12 is going to make it harder for these smaller schools to win.
Yeah.
You think back to when we were growing up and it was just 2 teams and they didn't even have an official national championship game a lot of the time. It was the top 2 teams ranked would just play each other in one of the bowls.
When I wasn't into it that much, I was always wondering what's even going on and how do they pick these
and
teams?
And they'd have disputed national championships. That was weird, and I'm glad we got away from that. Then you got to the point where you have 2 teams in. And I remember the Boise State years early in the 2000s when they were going on undefeated runs. And one of those years they beat OU.
Yeah.
I think it was the Fiesta Bowl, and they had the Statue of Liberty play.
Yeah.
But you got to think back then, all you needed to do was convince the committee or the voters to just say, well, they're undefeated, let's put them in, and you got to win 1 football game.
Absolutely.
And then, even in the last few years, you had to win 2. I mean, look at TCU. They went in and beat Michigan a couple years ago. But then that second game, they get clobbered by Georgia because they didn't have 3 weeks to prepare they did for Michigan.
And most of us would think Michigan would have put up a better fight. I mean, we don't know that,
absolutely,
but we believe that would have happened, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at that same Michigan team the next year went undefeated and won a national championships.
Yeah.
I think that, it was a matter of, yes, Michigan maybe wasn't as good the year prior, but they're still way better than TCU. That's a game that if Michigan plays TCU 10 times, Michigan wins 9.
For
and
sure,
it just so happens TCU won that one. But I don't see a team like that, or a Boise State or a Liberty, because people are talking about Liberty being like undefeated. And it's like, well, they're playing nobody. They're going to get undefeated. They're going to go into, Bama or Georgia, whichever doesn't win the SEC, and get clobbered by them. And even if they manage to win one of those games against one of those teams, round 2 is the next week, and that team has been just doing nothing but resting, waiting for it. It's going to be tough.
Well, I
But
think
that being said, I love it. I think it's going to make for great football at the end of the year, because that first round's also higher seed hosts it. And there's not much cooler than a team hosting a college football playoff game. Can you imagine Penn State, the white crowd, they're hosting a college football playoff game? I mean, that would just be awesome.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, it'll be fun. I think most of us want to see that. We're not talking about Florida State, but, I think it'll cut out a lot of that stuff. I mean, people will still want to take that step, right? It's still something for the program. If you're a smaller school, a school that's not expected to get there, of course, it's an achievement, to make the playoff and be there. But I think, especially after we see this first year go, I expect the higher seeds to, get it handed to them. And hopefully those teams that are just on the outside, you won't hear as much noise about trying to get in just to get, your butts kicked kind of thing. So I'm excited for it. I think it'll be a lot of fun. I think it'll get us, truthfully, we'll be able to watch the best teams come into form versus when it was just the 4. There could be that number 5, number 6. Last year is a great example. I mean, Georgia, I think personally, if the goal is your 4 best teams that are out there, I think Georgia's probably it. Now, I think they got it right based on the records and how everything played out. I actually do think they got it perfectly last year. But that being said, if it is purely the best teams, I think most of us would have agreed Georgia would need to be in that. This will give us that opportunity because, again, nobody probably over 10 is really going to be able to make noise multiple times, right? One game, possibly. Multiple games, I doubt it. So this will allow the teams to truly get to that final spot and say, okay, you won multiple games, you got there, you beat the opponents, now you got to win that last game. I think most of us will be pleased with the champion, whoever that is.
Yeah, and maybe one of the potential outcomes that's positive from this, that we probably won't know for a few years at least, is with more teams making the playoffs, there might be a bigger dispersion of the best athlete.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably only going to affect the athletes who are really interested in like their brand and, and that's their most important thing maybe, rather than, those guys who are like, no, I want to be coached by the best coach. I want to make it to the NFL as a wide receiver, so I'm going to go and get coached by the best wide receiver coach in all of college football. So I still think, the rich are going to be rich and the SEC and the Big Ten are going to continue to dominate, but I think it's going to make for some awesome football at the end of the year and just a lot of it, way more than we've ever got.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Football's back, baby. Ready for it.
That's right. All right, well, let's take a quick break, and we'll then transition into part 2 here in just a moment. All right, we are back. This is part 2 of Just Ballin' with JB, and we're going to talk a little bit of fantasy football here real quick before we get into some more of the best sports stories out there right now. So, Jeff, anything you want to share on the fantasy football front for our listeners?
Well, hey, we get it. Everybody talking about their fantasy leagues and their players and stuff. It's not always the most exciting thing. But Jordan and I are in one league together with some family, friends, some people that we know really closely. So that'd be the only one that we're going to mention. We'll talk about it briefly and, again, more in the capacity of how it's affecting everybody's fantasy teams, right? It affects ours, but it affects yours, the listeners as well. Everybody who's out there, someone gets hurt, it's going to affect all of ours. So that's the only league we're going to talk about. In this one, in particular, we do a little thing for our fantasy league. The low score of every week has to shotgun a beer and send a video to the group. So it's our 3rd year doing this league. The first 2 years, I was the low man the first 2 weeks and had to shotgun a beer. This year, I decided to come out really strong, put up a nice 170, be the high score. But Jordan, on the other hand, decided to come in at a measly, 85-ish, somewhere around there?
I think I had 86, maybe.
86, okay. So Jordan knows the shotgun, and I think he wants to take a moment to send that out.
Yeah, before I get started, I would like to just say this is a pretty big fall from grace, considering I won the league last year, and then week one, I'm low point man. So rags to riches, but in reverse here, unfortunately. So
So don't hire him as your GM.
cheers, everybody.
Let's do it. Yeah, while he's doing that, the key to my successful start is the Eagles. You'll find very quickly that I'm high on the Eagles. Saquon Barkley on my squad, A.J. Brown, and Jake Elliott. So that's a heck of a squad. There we go. Nicely done, Jordy.
Whew.
We'll have to send this out to everybody so they can catch that video and give them credit for the shotgun. Nicely done.
That was a bit more of a mess than I anticipated it to be.
I used to doing those inside your house. Yeah, it's...
Yeah, I'm used to doing these outdoors, which throws me off a bit. They say practice where you play, and unfortunately, I'm playing indoors. And yeah, I've actually got some bad news. I think my fantasy football team is going to struggle a little bit. I struggled picking up a good running back, and I feel like that's going to be the detriment of my team. So I'm just hoping for some luck because I don't think I'm going to win the chip this year.
Yeah, we'll see. I feel good. Obviously, high score of the week is great, but good weeks happen, bad weeks happen, so not getting too high. The only funny story was I thought I was missing a second running back. I had Ramondre Stevenson from the Patriots. I offered him and Pickens up to my cousin for Aaron Jones, and he declined. And he said, "I like the offer, but he said I got to at least see what he does in the first week." I said, "That's fair." I said, "I thought if I offer this and these guys go off, I'm going to look like an idiot." But I had to do it. I wanted to get a good second solid running back, and both my guys played well. And I don't think Jones had an incredible game. I can't remember his numbers, but so now I'm probably going to keep him. And we'll see what it does for the year.
Smart. Yeah, I mean, you got to take those opportunities when they come. You can't hope that the next week's going to change it. If anything, it's just going to make the price go up.
And Dallas Cowboys taught us that.
Yeah, that's right. All right. So speaking of NFL, let's get back to it. So let's talk about some underreported stories. And that may not be the best title for the segment. It's a working title at the moment for us, but. Jeff, do you have one you want to share with the audience here?
Yeah, I'm going to bring one up. It might be a little bit of a shocker for you. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily been totally underreported, including the offseason, but the reporting on it has been incredibly negative. And I'm actually going the opposite way on it. I'm actually pretty high on it. So I'm talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers and their quarterback competition. All offseason, it's been the worst quarterback competition you could imagine. And this goes back a little bit to last year even, because I was with Justin Fields. I don't want to say I was his number one fan or, in love with him, but the conversations, obviously, from all Bears fans when you have that number one pick, and there's even a little talk of Caleb maybe not wanting to go to Chicago. You say, like, what if we keep Justin Fields and we trade that for some serious assets right now? The defense is already great, but maybe add a piece there on defense, beef up the O-line. You could get some serious stuff for Caleb Williams, right? The hype was that big for him. So my only reason for being okay with that move is, one, I do think Caleb is going to be a generational talent. But two, you're going to have to pay Fields. So to commit to paying him without having really seen enough at that point, I was obviously more than okay with what we decided on. But that being said, I did like Fields. I thought we could make that trade for the number one pick and have a really nice team. Last couple years, finishing 6, 7, 8 wins, whatever it's been, but they've given away games in the fourth quarter like they were purposely doing it. So I was okay with them. Now you got this spot. Russell gets hurt, so there's not necessarily this competition. He kind of slides in. The pressure doesn't have to be there as much as it would have been otherwise. I mean, a Mike Tomlin-led team, it's just playoffs year after year after year after year. Now, nothing has gotten further than that. That's been obviously the issue the last few years. But that defense is legit. I think that's a nice gritty defense that they have. And Pickens is a lot better than I even expected. Even a week ago, I was willing to get rid of him on fantasy. And he had a really nice game. I think his potential is there. If he can build with Fields and they can create something there, I like that. 2 solid running backs. Again, never been a huge fan of Najee Harris, but I think he's solid. Is it Jalen Warren, I think? Or yeah, Jalen Warren.
Yeah, Jalen Warren.
2 backs that you can go back and forth with on there. I think it's a solid team on their own, on their face. But then I look at it now as in the division, right? Typically, we're looking at that's a tough division. It's hard. It's physical. I think
that's what we think. That's what we think.
And that they're as physical as anybody in the division, one.
Yeah.
But two, now after that week 1, and again, some of these thoughts I had even prior to the season, but week 1 kind of confirmed it. I'm down on Cincy from what everyone thought. I mean, they obviously Burrow getting hurt last year, the number, we were kind of going up from where that was, but I'm down on the expectations that they had for this year. Definitely after week 1, definitely after Jamar Chase not getting a deal, T. Higgins still having an injury going on. The Ravens, again, same thing. I think everybody wanted to see the same team as last year. I think they might have taken a step back. Different coordinators coming in. The defense lost a few key guys. Again, we've already talked about Lamar plenty today. I mean, what's he going to be able to do in the big moments? And then Cleveland, I think that's a topic everybody's been on and everybody's thinking. I've mentioned it briefly to you, but I think the Deshaun, I mean, no one talks about it like basketball, but it's like having the yips like a Ben Simmons thing. Like you have the talent's all there and then something happens and it's gone. I think that's where he's at. I was looking at some of the videos of his missed passes and it was, it didn't look like someone was a little off, a little slow, a little rusty. It was like something's gone. Something's not here that once was. So when I look at that, just in the division alone, I honestly give them a decent chance to win that. I get Baltimore is going to be there. I don't think they're toast because they lost 1 game to the Chiefs, but I think they could put up a battle against them. I'm not that worried about Cleveland and Cincy. Definitely a wild card opportunity. So I'm high on them as a whole. I think Justin Fields is going to get this opportunity to really run with it. See what he can do with not a whole lot of pressure. Hopefully Russ embraces the backup role, is kind of coaching him up, giving him some guidance. I'm not down on him. So I like the squad. I think they're going to be quite a bit better than people were probably thinking coming into the year with the quarterback battle they had going on.
Yeah, I mean, I got to say that's definitely a different take. I can't say that I totally agree with everything. I do like a couple of your points. I think that it's a good roster overall. I just think, what are you doing at quarterback? I get Justin Fields is not the worst, but he just really hasn't shown an ability to, make the progression reads and go from, his first, second, third, then make a decision. I mean, he scrambles. He still fumbles snaps way too often. And what are you going to do at the end of the year? I mean, that's the big question. Is he going to do enough this year? If you're right, if Pittsburgh ends up making the playoffs and Justin Fields looks decent, I mean, maybe he does maybe he gets a Jordan Love type contract the first time around, where the Packers gave him I am going to get the numbers wrong, but it was like 3 years and like $70 million. And so it's like, yeah, it's good money. It's great money. Don't get me wrong. For an NFL quarterback, though, I mean, look at Dak Prescott. I mean, he's going to make almost that every year.
Yeah.
So, I think that maybe that's what Pittsburgh is going to do, but I just feel like they're in quarterback no man land. I mean, they had Ben Roethlisberger for nearly 2 decades, and they just never got a replacement for him. I don't know if they thought he would never get old and retire. I mean, we all watched the last 5 years of his career. He wasn't exactly killing it.
Well, yeah, he's the opposite of Ben. So Ben couldn't barely move, and Justin's moving a heck of a lot. And again, I'm not saying, sitting here saying Justin Fields is the next Lamar Jackson necessarily, but I'm kind of actually treating it a little bit like the Bears situation, right? Like if that I get Justin Fields been in the league for quite some time, but now he's in a new situation with a new coach. And I just have a feeling Tomlin, I mean, we all, I think, agree that Tomlin's an incredible coach. Now, he's a different coach than other coaches, right? Belichick's different than Andy Reid, and everybody runs their teams differently. But I think he's going to have this good connection with Fields. I think he's going to be able to get the most out of him. I think they're going to take advantage of his ability to run. He's never been a terrible deep ball thrower. So, I mean, if you can pick those off every once in a while, again, you got a couple deep threats that can get out there. Couple plays here and there with the solid defense. And again, you got a couple running backs. You're not just even dependent on one good running back. You have a couple guys that can get out there, take a little bit of pressure off him. I think similar to, again, Caleb Williams and the Bears, who's these first few weeks is kind of an opportunity to hold the flow with a good defense. Just don't kill us. Don't be throwing big picks, anything that kills you. Keep a decent record. let some of these other guys mess up. Let some of these other guys fall and get into really bad positions. Cleveland goes 0-2. You start getting to, Bengals have a good chance. I mean, they're playing the Chiefs. They get down 0-2. I get they've done that in the past. But, let these other guys kind of start to falter, and you keep up and keep a decent pace. I didn't mention the first game of the year, but, I mean, they played Atlanta. I think most people are pretty high on Atlanta. I think, again, I'm not saying Super Bowl contender, but I think most people are thinking it's a good team. After what we saw last year with those weapons, we're saying, okay, you bring Kirk Cousins in, again, post-Achilles fine, a little bit older, but he's been consistent. He's a solid quarterback all around. You got the weapons with Bijan and Pitts, Drake London, all these young guys who can play. I think a lot of people were feeling pretty good about Atlanta. The defense had picked up this year. So for them to come out week one with, again, kind of this quarterback battle that they've been going through, Russ gets hurt last minute kind of thing, and Justin Fields steps in. I don't know. I think that's a really good win. I think, we saw it last year with, who the heck did they have Pickett last year? I mean, they end up making the playoffs doing that. I think, like I said, in the fact that I'm a little bit down on that whole division, right? Again, I mean, the Ravens, I think will be fine. I'm not overreacting to 1 week, but I think Cleveland, a lot of us are down on. Cincy, again, a lot of turmoil, a lot of stuff going on there. I think they can make a nice run. I obviously get the skepticism, and that's kind of, the point of bringing this one up. I think people are not thinking much of them, and I just got a little feeling for them. So that's my people underreacting to a situation.
Well, if you're right, then I think this is Zach Taylor's last year coaching the Bengals. And I already think he's probably on a little bit of a hot seat here. But if they are as bad as they looked, and they just got beat by the New England Patriots, who I think most people thought they were about on the same par as the Carolina Panthers.
And Giants, I mean, that tier
those
was
are
all
just bad teams. To lose in your first game when, Burrow's supposedly healthy, right? We haven't had a healthy start to a season for Burrow really in his career other than his first season, and then he got hurt later.
Yeah.
So I think if Cincinnati misses the playoffs and Burrow stays healthy and Chase stays healthy and plays, I mean, obviously they're the cheapest organization in the National Football League. They might never pay him.
What's the deadline for them being able to give him a deal? Do you know? I don't know the rules on that. Is that done, or can they still do it?
No, I think they can still do it.
Okay.
It depends on whether or not he's willing to negotiate during the season or not, or if the team is. Sometimes they won't negotiate during the season, but yeah. I mean, I think that if you're right, Zach Taylor's probably gone, and that's a good job, assuming you are okay working for lower pay because, again, their owner clearly doesn't want to pay anybody. So that's a tough spot for the Bengals are in, because I like a lot of their players, but man, they got to get it done. Maybe it'll be a turning
point. Maybe it'll have to, it'll finally come up if they care. I mean, some of those guys don't care. When you got that much money, it's just a hobby. It's something you don't care that much about. Some people are, Steve Ballmer, it's like it's their entire life. Even though they got plenty of money to do everything, that's what they care about. Maybe it'll be a turning point. If you end up going down that quick, Pittsburgh's able to rebound without feeling like we had any actual transition from Ben Roethlisberger, and they're able to transition basically over the top of you as you kind of did, one up, and then you just fell down. Maybe it'll be their spot to say, all right, we gotta start paying people. I don't know, but I do think we're all like Joe Burrow. We all like what we have seen. We just aren't seeing it consistently enough. And the rest of the team, I think most of us would agree, has never been, a roster that we're like, hey, this is, top 5 roster all the time. It's mostly because you had Burrow, Chase, Higgins, Boyd, which obviously is not there now, but I mean, I think that's why we were high on them. So I don't know. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, obviously a lot can happen in that division. It's a battle, but that's kind of my underreaction. I think they're going to do well. I'm picking the playoffs for them, and I like them then doing some damage later in the year. Interesting.
Funny that you really liked the Pittsburgh's performance, which I guess So my overreaction or underreported story, I think it's a bit of a combo of both, is from the same game, actually. Kirk Cousins is getting replaced by week 4.
I like that.
He can't move. He already was a pretty unmobile quarterback, and now he's even less mobile. And honestly, he doesn't look good. And that loss to Pittsburgh is tough because next week they go to Philadelphia, And Philly is going to want to clean up some of the mistakes they made. Yes, they got the win, but they're going to be back at
It
home.
was a solid win.
Jalen had a lot of turnovers,
Yeah.
and could have had more. And I think they're going to want to clean things up. And Atlanta just doesn't look very good. So you go 0-2 to start the season, and then week 3 is Kansas City.
Yeah.
I don't see Atlanta competing against Kansas City at the moment. So you go 0-3. You drafted a quarterback with the 8th pick in the draft, when you had just signed Kirk Cousins to a multi-$100 million deal. I think that they go 0-3 and Kirk Cousins doesn't look significantly better. Michael Penix, I think, is starting week 4, and that week 4 schedule looks pretty nice. So it's a perfect opportunity for someone like Penix. You've got New Orleans, Tampa, Carolina, Seattle, Tampa. And I do think Tampa's good, but I don't think they're like, this stud team that's going to be a huge, difficult matchup for the Falcons. I think the Falcons are going to match up pretty well with Tampa. I think it'll be an offensive kind of shootout, but I think you got to get Penix in there, man. And you draft him that high, you paid Kirk Cousins, but when you find the right guy, you figure out a way to get him on the field. And my only assumption that I can make from them drafting Penix was they felt like we found the guy. We can't just pass him up because we just signed a quarterback who's 38 years old coming off a torn Achilles.
Which I respect, as long as they will get him in if and when it makes sense.
Yeah.
Instead of what you see like New York Giants going through. It's like, well, we gave Danny Dime this contract. We got to play it out. Now, I don't know all the contract situations. I'm not an expert on all that stuff. I'd love to disagree with your take, but I really liked Penix. I liked watching him at the end of last year. I mean, I thought he can really throw the ball. I know he's a little bit older, which I think is, a positive in a lot of senses, just being a little bit more mature. I get athleticism-wise and some of that, maybe prefer the younger quarterback, but I don't think that's totally his game as it is. He can sling the ball from the pocket. So to me, I don't disagree. I like the idea like, we already paid that guy, but he's there. We got to take him. Now I just say you got to play him if and when it makes sense to do. And I don't disagree. I mean, Kirk has never been that high on my list. Again, you got to respect the money that he's made, the career that he has. He's done some really good stuff in the league.
He's done the money game better than anybody.
Yeah, maybe Dak will somehow, but Dak could still, he still has some potential to make some serious noise. I don't know if Kirk has that still left in him, but I like Penix a lot. I'm a big fan of him. I think with all the weapons that they have, being as young as they are, personally think that's gonna be kind of just a gelling factor that's a little bit better for those players. Are going to feel a little bit better with that. I'd love to see it sooner rather than later. I don't know all the money situations. I was just hearing who's the big, like Deshaun Watson, if they just cut him or drop him, like all the dead money that's there. I get that stuff. Yeah. But you and I know, we've talked about, in our business, the sunk costs all the time. And at some point, I don't know where it comes into play, but do you keep playing a guy who we know sucks and is not going to get us where we want simply because we paid him the money? Or do we just cut our losses now? We know it's going to suck, it's going to hurt, but we do it, and will we try and get on to the better? I don't know, but I'd love to see that. Like I said, I'm a big Penix fan. I think he's pretty solid. I like him a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how Cleveland's going to handle their QB problem with their contract, because that one's a real nightmare, and I don't know that Deshaun Watson's a locker room guy. I mean, I'm just saying, based on the stories I've heard, I would not be a buddy of his. Like, if he was my coworker, I'd be like, I don't want anything to do with this dude. Like, what a weirdo. Like, and I'm not saying that. Look, I get it. He hasn't been convicted of anything, but there was just another woman came out, I think, earlier today.
Oh, really?
And there's another new allegation of, sexual assault and just the weird masseuse stuff. Like, I'm just like, I think that he not only has lost it, got the yips, I think is kind of the term you used, actually, but he just is a weird dude. So I don't know what they're going to do, because if they bench him, is he going to be supportive of Jameis Winston? I don't know about that. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, I do think as much of a competitor as Kirk Cousins is, he's a good dude. And
he's a man of God.
He is a man of God. And if he gets in a situation where Michael Penix beats him out, I think he's going to be really pissed.
Yeah.
Obviously.
I think
but
he'll
he's
be a
also
pro.
going to be an ultimate professional. And I think Atlanta is in a good spot there because, yeah, it sucks to have so much money tied up to your backup quarterback at that point. But at least you've got a guy in your backup quarterback that's been around, kind of like an Alex Smith type. Just he's had a lot of success, like, as a QB in the league. Just hasn't won the ultimate, prize. But maybe he could unlock that in the Falcons as a backup QB. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I think Penix is going to be awesome, and I really think they got a good quarterback there. But if he doesn't play all year, it's going to be tough.
No, I mean, everything, like I said, I agree with everything you said. And, you mentioned Cleveland again and their issues, which supports my Steelers case. You mentioned Atlanta and, their tough, start of the season. That's going to be tough. Like they end up this, as Penix come in week 4. The Steelers are almost the opposite. They got the Broncos coming up. Chargers and Colts, are iffy. Cowboys, I think, is a tough one. But then you got Raiders, Giants, Commanders coming up. I mean, they have some wins that they can chalk up. And again, Chargers, Colts, I think those are great games that they can win.
I think they'll win one of those 2 games. They could win one of them.
On it. But I do agree with you 100%. I like Penix a lot. I think, nothing against Kirk. The guy seems like a good guy. I love those quarterback show, stuff that they do on Netflix. Mm-hmm. Awesome to see the behind the scenes stuff, their life, like who they are as a person. The wide receiver one, like seeing them go through those injuries and stuff, like Debo. It just kind of gives you a view of things that I don't think us normal people get to see. And it kind of goes back to your point of Kirk, going into there. I think so many of us as fans, you just want to sit there and say, like, what? So you're going to make 140 mil, 150, whatever you end up getting, 180. I don't know what he ended up getting in his deal.
I think it was 180.
So you're going to get 180 mil, and all you got to do is sit there and, like, help teach a guy. Like, who wouldn't want to do that? But what you don't understand is, like, these guys are ultra competitors. That is why they're where they're at. So it would be really tough, and to your point, like, Deshaun probably isn't going to do that. He's probably not a guy who's going to do it, not trying to say anything bad about him. Kirk, I think, is a guy just because of the persona we've seen behind the scenes even, that he will be a guy who will do that. It won't be easy. It will be really hard for him to do it, but I think he'd be a professional and would do it. And is it worth 180 mil? Probably not to the penny, but I think you could justify paying somebody who's going to come in there and seriously try and coach this guy and train this guy to do really well. And so I'm not rooting against Kirk. Hope he does okay. But like I said, I do like Penix, and yeah, Kirk did not look quite up to snuff in the first week. So
yeah, I mean, again, this is why it's an overreaction. But I think my overreaction here is gonna turn out to be right. And if it's not week 4, I'll tell you what, week 4 is gonna be Kirk Cousins' biggest game because he's gonna be playing New Orleans, who I don't think is any good. I know they just put a beat down on.
So what are we going to check in after week 4? I'm saying after week 4, Steelers are 3-1. You're saying Penix is starting. He's going to be announced starting. Okay.
Yep.
Let's check back in on that to week 4.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen is I think Kirk Cousins is going to get pulled mid-game in week 4, and that's when they're going to put Penix in, so that after week 4, Penix will be the starter moving forward.
Okay, that's perfect.
Because I think they're going to give Kirk the opportunity to play against lesser competition in the Saints, and I think he's still going to struggle because I don't know that a 38-year-old. I mean, I'm 31, and I feel like if I tore my Achilles, I'd have a hard time rehabbing that to just go back to doing, like, regular gym stuff.
I mean, you kind of dress like Kirk Cousins with that. You and him are hitting the Kohl's discount week that they have. I think that was last week.
This is from London, baby. This is not from Kohl's.
You have to prove that later. Camera can't see it. All right, so week 4, we're checking back in on those. I think those will be some good check-ins for us.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on here. So let's talk about the games that we're going to be watching this week. NFL, college football. You got anything that's going to be on your tube?
Yeah, I mean, I'll hit on the NFL stuff. I mean, I think, we've talked obviously about the Bears, and that'll be definitely a topic of conversation that comes up a lot, being Chicago guys. But Bears-Texans, definitely excited for that one.
Sunday night, baby. That's going to be awesome.
Sunday night is right. Prime time, I think. Again, we talk about, nerves and pressure stuff. Maybe Caleb's a guy who does like the bright lights, loves seeing that stuff, So maybe, he learned a bit in the first week. I wouldn't shock me if he comes out and puts up a serious game in week 2. Not just like 150 up from 95. Like if he puts up 350, if he throws a couple touchdowns, I mean, if he has some electric plays that we're like, okay, that's the guy that we were picturing and seeing. Now, maybe he does make a mistake, throws a pick, something stupid in there as well. But I wouldn't be shocked if, the bright lights kind of perk him up. We've obviously seen Stroud. That guy is a player. Both sides. I mean, if Caleb can be what we think he can be, it's kind of in that Stroud territory, or where Stroud still has to prove some stuff, but kind of in that realm. 3 wide receivers. Again, I think I'll take the Texans receiver room. I think a little bit just, those guys have had a little more time to prove themselves. Rome sounds like he got a little tweak of something this week. I do like him. Keenan's a little bit older, so I'd probably take the Tex. But 3, solid receivers on both sides. Yeah, hoping it'll be a nice shootout. I mean, the Bears defense hopefully can hold the Texans back a little bit to give the Bears the edge, but I think that'll be quite a fun game on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like the I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but it looked like the betting line was Houston -7. So I kind of like that because I think it's going to be a close game. I think the Bears could shock some people and win that one. Their defense is great, man. I think Jalen Johnson might be the most underrated DB out there. The dude just locks guys down. And, that's definitely one I'll be watching. I'm also going to be watching Bama, Wisconsin. I think that's going to be a pretty cool game. Bama's first real test going up to Madison, and that's an awesome environment for college football. It'll be an opportunity for Kalen DeBoer and the Bama team to show what they're made of. And I personally think they're going to go in there and they're going to put on a show. I think it's going to be a great game for Bama. I don't think it's going to be a great game for Wisconsin. As a viewer, I'd like it to be competitive, but I think Bama is going to go in there and win by 3 touchdowns, and I don't think it's ever going to look that close past maybe the first quarter. But I think it's going to be really fun to see that Bama offense click, and like they did in the fourth quarter last week.
Yeah,
and then I might be watching Oklahoma State and Tulsa because they're playing in Tulsa, so
there you go.
I'm toying with the idea of going to that game, but we'll see.
That would be fun. If Tulsa could put up a fight, it would be fun. I mean, I was actually looking at it because you were at the OK State game this past weekend against Arkansas.
Yeah,
and that was a really fun game, back and forth, going to OT and stuff. And I was looking at Tulsa, just trying to see who they play, what they've done, and they lost to Arkansas State. So I was like, okay, well, that doesn't, Arkansas is pretty solid. Arkansas State is not all that solid. So that doesn't bode well for a great matchup, but is like a lot of, in-state rivalries or even, high school rivalries we go back to. I mean, whether the team is good or bad, Bears, Packers, teams are good or bad, one's good, one's bad. Like, there's still that juice, that flow that comes into the game that typically creates a good environment, a competitive game, right? Even if someone ends up pulling away at the end, typically good. So, that wouldn't be a fun one to go to if it's close by to you and check it out. I'd be interested in checking what they can do.
You know what they call that rivalry game? It's called the Turnpike Classic. So, with a name like that, it really makes you feel like you.
One other one that I was going to mention, back to the NFL, we hit college for a minute, but Thursday night, Thursday night for me, obviously it's first game of the week coming up, so it's like probably checking that out at least to some extent. Miami-Buffalo, division matchup, both tight games, first week. I think some people had, Bills on upset alert, I think, losing Stephon Diggs. Arizona, healthy Kyler Murray getting Marvin Jones, even though he didn't really do anything in the first week. People were kind of mentioning that, but watching Josh Allen, I mean, he had a heck of a game. He's a fun player to watch. I mean, you mentioned Lamar Jackson. I'd throw Josh Allen up there as number 2 exciting player, just with everything he's doing, the running, the dive, I mean, all the stuff he's bringing to the table. But they pulled that out. It was a nice win at the end. He played really well. I think they have a couple young receivers. Keon Coleman, that's Shakir, I think it is. They got some young guys who I think will be pretty solid, just got to build some chemistry with. And then Miami, I mean, they're building off, what they've done the last couple of years. And I think for them, it's clearly getting a little bit tougher, playing in different conditions, doing that stuff. But I mean, that could be a fun one. I wouldn't be shocked if that's a bit of a shootout, which, on a Thursday night, kind of ramping up for the weekend, a shootout is kind of nice, something to get excited about.
Yeah, the bar was set pretty high with the opening night game last Thursday. So hopefully Bills Dolphins fits the bill as well.
Yeah, no question.
All right, let's talk a little gambling, and we're gonna start with locks of the week. So I believe Jeff, you've got a lock. I've got a lock.
Why don't you start with your lock? I want to hear your lock first.
All right, you want to hear mine? Okay, so my lock of the week, and looks like as of right now, the current spread is -6.5 for Dallas over the Saints. I think this is criminally underrated because I think Vegas is giving way too much stock to the Saints smashing the Panthers, who I think is the worst football team in the NFL, and might lose to Georgia if they played straight up. They are just not a good football team. They're poorly run organization.
All the NFL players would disagree with that, but
I mean, all of them would, and they're probably right. But
still feels
Carolina
that way
is awful.
Yeah,
and I think that Dallas. This time of year is when Dallas just cooks. They've been working on all offseason on offensive plays. That's what Jerry Jones loves. He loves seeing his offense high-flying. They locked up CD. They locked up Dak. And, would I want to have Dak making the kind of money he's going to be making as my starting quarterback going forward? Probably not. But that being said, they're still a 10 to 12 to 13 win team. Even if I don't think they can, win a Super Bowl with the current roster, and I think they're going to smash the Saints. Cleveland's defense was good, is a very good defense actually.
Yeah.
Dallas did great. Now it's difficult when your offense is doing absolutely nothing. So as a defense, you're out there for what feels like the entirety of the game. So I get
field
that.
Position, out there a lot. Yeah,
Fatigue
but still
starts to build in over the course of a game. But Dallas just looks like they're humming along on offense. And, I mean, even Zeke looked pretty decent. Now, I don't think he's going to be great this year, but he looked a little better than I would have expected.
He looks spry, yeah. I like what I saw from him.
So, that's my lock. I think it's easily – I think that Vegas could have made that 10.5. And I'd still take Dallas and the points. I just think it's that. I think it's that big of a discrepancy there. So that's my lock of the week. Dallas,
I like it. It's a solid pick. I would say I probably would be in a spot like looking at some of these games, ahead of time. I was like, I didn't want to touch it because to me, it's a game that either like the Saints somehow come out and upset them. The defense is absolutely cooking, and the Dallas just happens to be a little bit off, and like the Saints actually win straight up. Or to your point, Dallas just goes, they win by 3 touchdowns, no problem. I could see either one happening, and it's one of those ones where you start looking at where's the money flowing. Is this a sucker bet? Is everyone getting in on it? So I like the pick. I wouldn't be against it. I wouldn't tell people not to put their money on that. I think, like I said, there's a good chance we're here next week, and it's like, yeah, they won by 21, 28 points. Like, that would not shock me. But like I said, if it goes the opposite, I don't think they're winning by 3 or even 7, like just covering. I think they're either blowing them out or, like I said, the Saints. The Saints they're just a tough team. Since Drew Brees has left, I feel like those guys, it is really hard to bet them. I see them on the schedule. I don't even look at the game. It's like I just can never tell what they do. They upset teams. They make these wins that you would not expect, and then they lose games that you're like, how did you not win that game? In the first week, like
Dennis
I said,
Allen, their head coach, he is awful.
That's the answer. Yeah. So it's like, what do I make of the first week? Yeah, they crushed them. I am impressed by that. Like I'm not surprised they won. I'm pretty impressed that they smoked. I'm pretty impressed the offense scored that much. Like I am pretty impressed by the win. Again, it's one of those things with a big spread. You're supposed to do it fair. But it's the Saints. We weren't talking about Dallas beating the Panthers by that much. That, I think we'd all be like, yeah, no question. If they win by 30, that'd be, like, doable. But for the Saints, not really expecting that much from the offense. That's – but, again, like you said, when the other offense is that bad, it's putting the defense in good positions, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I like the pick. I'm not opposed to it.
All right, what's your lock? What do you got?
So I was bouncing around between 2 picks. I wasn't sure. I hate to feel like you're picking chalky stuff. I'm in one survivor pool. But what I've learned in those pools is, I always think like, oh, I'll take a game that's kind of close to win now, and then I'll pick the locks later, to have them in the back pocket. And I never make it to later. I lose right away because I try and pick these, tight ones. So I like the Chiefs -6. I think it's at right now. Currently, last time I looked, I don't know if it's moved at all. Either way, I would take them at 6.5, 5.5. Still at 6. I'd take them by a touchdown over the Bengals. I think, it's been talked about like the Bengals kind of have their number. One good game.
Is T. Higgins back?
From what I heard, not. I've actually heard that they think it might almost flip-flop. Like T. Higgins will be in and Jamar Chase will be out with something because, he doesn't have his deal. Like any lingering things they might just sit on. Like he might just sit. I don't really know. You saw Jamar Chase talk after the game. He's in a spot where I think he just doesn't care too much. If they're not gonna treat him the way he thinks he should be treated, which most people believe, like, top pick like that, you got to pay the guy. I don't think he's fully invested. Some people think Burrow's got some hampering injuries a little bit. They start slow to begin with. I just don't really think anything is going for the Bengals personally. The Chiefs, like I said, I think you're playing the Ravens, who had to be at least one of the most motivated competitors for week 1 that you could pick, right? Could you pick another team who is more motivated to beat the Chiefs in week 1? I doubt it.
No,
they played well.
They definitely wanted them.
Yeah, and they played fairly well. Again, we talked a lot Lamar's struggles at the end of the game, but they did play well. They had over 450 yards total. They played well, and the Chiefs still, figure out a way to win and win by a decent margin. I think covering a touchdown is not going to be a problem. I see them up a couple scores at the end of the game, and maybe they let the defense kind of like, whatever, just takes a lot of time off the clock and score this last touchdown. At least they're going to win by the 7. That'd be my take. So that's I think the Chiefs are, again, I know it's a little chalky. Everybody's up on the Chiefs, but I just think with the Bengals struggles, you got to take it while it's there. I'm taking that one and running with it.
Yeah, I get that bet. The Bengals looked awful, and they do always start slow. I'd be nervous about a backdoor cover where, the Chiefs are winning by 2 touchdowns the whole game, and at the very end, Cincinnati scores a meaningless touchdown to lose by 5, with time expiring basically, and that's the tough spot, and Cincinnati does historically play Kansas City pretty well.
Yeah,
but I think
it's been a while
Kansas
since
City,
they played them that
Kansas
well.
City looks a lot better. So,
but I do agree with you, though. That's my concern with it. I think similarly. Even to yours, I don't know. I didn't see a whole lot of locks that I really, really liked this week. I like yours as much as I can like one. Again, I have a little concern with it. I think Chiefs is the same thing. I could see them being up 10. 10, as the clock's winding down, and they're just like, whatever, score, just as time's expiring, we don't really care. We're still going to win by 3. So, yeah, I think that's the concern. You know me, I might buy it down to -3 and throw a little teaser on the over-under or something. So we'll see.
That's the way to go.
We'll see what we find. But it's a lock. It's a lock. Lock it down. Put your money on it. -6 Chiefs all day. Xavier Worthy going deep. Travis Kelce touchdown as well. That's the parlay with Travis Kelce. He's getting a touchdown this week.
Oh, that would be perfect. I got him on my fantasy team, so I need him to do well.
Lock it in.
All right, we'll circle back with those next week to see how we did. Let's play a quick game before we wrap this first episode up. This game we're going to play is just called Over Under, and we're going to just rattle off some teams. So I believe Jeff's got some AFC teams he's going to ask me, and I got to pick over or under, and I'm going to do the same for him with a few NFC teams. And we're going to track this and see how it does over the course of the year and kind of see how we're doing throughout the years. So you want to get us started? What AFC teams do you got for me, Jeff?
Let's see if you pick up on the trend that I came up with. I want to make these some juicy teams, but a little trend to them. So I got New York Jets. I guess you can check your lines if they were different. But New York Jets over under 9.5 wins.
Ooh. Under for sure.
Under that? Okay.
Yeah, I think Aaron Rodgers is suffering from the same affliction that Kirk Cousins is suffering from. He's just a little better, which is he's too old, coming off of an Achilles injury, and I don't see them winning 10 games. Too much, yeah. Too much ayahuasca.
All right, so
Under.
Jets under 9.5. All right, Cincinnati under 9.5 or over 9.5.
Oh, that's a tough one. And I think they are going to underperform this year, and I think that's going to cost Zach Taylor his job because otherwise, what do? I mean, you're going to ditch your best wide receiver. You're only going to pay a quarterback, and you're going to have nothing. I mean, I think there's a lot of pressure on Cincinnati this year. I think it came to fruition in week 1, and I think it's going to keep rearing its ugly head all season long. And so I got under on that one too.
Next one we got Chargers. Jim Harbaugh, Justin Herbert. The Chargers over under 9.5 wins.
Ooh, that's tough. I think I'm going to go over there. I think kind of the opposite of Jets and Bengals, where there's a lot of dysfunction clearly going on in those locker rooms. You know, for everything that Jim Harbaugh is, the one thing that he does really well is he seems to arrive wherever he's at with a lot of gusto, and he just gets his team, fired up and ready to fight. And I think they're going to be a solid team this year. I don't see them competing for a Super Bowl, but they kind of remind me a little bit of the Rams. But instead of being, very creative offensively, they're like the Rams, but they're just going to pound you inside all the game every week. I think they're just a solid team, starts at the line of scrimmage, and they're great at it. So I got over on the Chargers.
Okay. I don't know if you picked up on the trend here, but the trend ended up being, just by chance, the 9.5 win teams that were thrown out. And the last one is Miami Dolphins, which I had a hard time reading my handwriting. I'm like, what is that team? Is that Milwaukee? Did I right? I'm like, who's Milwaukee? Miami. So Miami over under 9.5 wins.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I like the over on that. I think they're a good enough team to win 9.5. I think the Jets are going to be bad. I think New England, while they won week 1, I don't see them competing. And I don't think the Bills are going to cruise through that division, even though I like Josh Allen a lot more than I like Tua. Tua gets an advantage playing Josh Allen early in the season. Yeah. Versus playing him late in the season. Now, I don't know when their second matchup is. I'm sure it's later in the year. But playing Josh Allen in week 2 is fantastic for Tua because he's not going to have to deal with any weather concerns. And that guy can't throw a football in cold weather. And Josh Allen can. I think the Bills will ultimately win that division again. But I like the Dolphins to cover 9.5 wins.
Okay, nice. So we got 4 9.5 win teams, 2 over, 2 under. That probably it's probably right. Two are probably going to be over, 2 are probably going to be under, I would guess. So let's see if you're right.
I would guess 2. Hopefully, I could have gone all 4 and then hedged, but.
Well, I was going to say, if you went all 4 under, I was going to be like, so I think the NFC is going to be a little bit better than a lot of people expected. Because I kind of was flirting with them in my head, just thinking, okay, how do I feel? And I was like, if you go all unders, yeah, maybe the NFC is going to be a little better than people think. We'll see, but.
All right, so I don't have a pattern with mine, but I do think they're going to be somewhat tricky. Okay. I'll start with first NFC team is Philly, 11.5 wins.
11.5 wins. I mean, that I am as high as can be on Philadelphia. I was shocked about the ending of the season last year. I don't know if anybody still knows, there's been a lot of names thrown around for what happened at the end of the year. But to start like they did, whatever it was, 10-1, 11-1. I mean, to start the way they did and finish that way, just very strange, very odd. I'm not concerned about the Hurts and Sirianni relationship. People are making a big fuss about that. I personally am too high on Jalen Hurts' character to think that that's going to be an issue that they're going to have a problem with. I think bringing in the new coordinators, although it's going to be a transition period, and early I think we're seeing that in the first game. But, it's funny how we change our, Packers are the Super Bowl pick for a lot of people. And now all of a sudden they lose, and it's like, well, they don't have a great defense. It was in Brazil. It's like, well, everybody went to Brazil. It was a tough travel for everybody. The Packers were still the same Packers you chose to go to the Super Bowl after what you saw last year. Love got hurt at the very end, but, it was basically the full team. And now we're kind of poo-pooing the win. win. So to me, I thought it was a really good win for the fact that they didn't play all that great, that Jalen Hurts was still struggling a little bit with some of that. I'm going to chalk that up to getting used to the new coordinator and, kind of going through some of those growing pains. I'm not concerned about not having the tush push as a guaranteed lock. I love that. Maybe they'll still go to it a little bit, but I'm not concerned. Saquon is as good as advertised. I think he's going to make a difference. I like DeAndre Swift. I think he'll be good for the Bears, but I think he adds a little different element. Defense is getting better. They're gonna be a work in progress all year. They're not going to be a top 5 defense, I don't think, but I think they'll get a lot better. So I like them getting over that. I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to win some of these cheap games throughout the early part of the season, and I think they're going to hit over that.
All right, over it is. Next up, we've got Chicago. They're at 8.5 wins.
8.5, yeah. I mean, to me, I'm locking that in as well as over. I mean, we've talked about them a little bit already. Based on the season they had last year, the schedule isn't overly tough. The division's tough. I think Jordan Love, being out, sets them back at least a little bit. Whether some division games come in when he's out or not, I think, it depends how long the injury will go. But I like him. I think that defense alone, like we talked about, I think that defense alone can get them 5 wins, in games where as long as the offense is semi-competent, right? This last game, they didn't throw for didn't get any touchdowns. But they also didn't throw any, no turnovers from Caleb. So I think as long as he can be, semi-competent early on, I think the defense can carry him. I think he's going to get it going. Like I said, whether, by the end of the year you're saying, okay, he is the next Mahomes or not, it doesn't have to be that far up. But as long as he's some solid quarterback play, I like the weapons. The defense is tremendous. Yeah, I think 8.5. I think the last few years they should have covered 8.5, to be honest. It felt like a few of the games at the end of the year they lost, not only in the fourth quarter, but like the last play of just like stupid turnover at the end of the game it like felt like they were trying to get that first pick. Like they were purposely tanking. So I think they could have got that the last couple years.
Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback.
Well, I think they were doing it intentionally to get They told Justin Fields to do that. So, yeah, I'm going over that one as well.
All right. There might be a trend. Tampa Bay, 7.5 wins.
7.5. So this one, I guess, might surprise you. I think the consensus would probably be over after seeing what you just saw. I'm going to go under. I know that's probably a little surprising just based on, again, what we saw. And is it 7.5? Is that the live? I had them at 8.5 because 8.5 would make me feel better going under. But if it's 7.5, I'll still take the under. That division just is such an interesting division. And those, we already talked about the Saints a little bit. I mean, those guys just, they're just weird down there to me. I mean, that's the only way to describe it. It's just weird how people get up, get down, bad games, good games, what they do. So I don't feel great about that. I think them getting outside the division and playing some of the better teams, we've talked about a little bit already, but I mean, those some of those games as they're traveling and they're playing the Lions this week. I think it'd be a good game. I'm hoping it's a good game and entertaining, but Lions are favored by 7. I think when they start getting out of their division a little bit and playing some other teams out of conference, it'll be a little bit tougher. They could still win the division even with, 7 wins or something, but I'm gonna go under just with maybe a few missteps throughout the year with some of the competition.
All right, yeah, that's different than my perspective on that. I think Tampa Bay is pretty solid. I think Baker is underrated, but I think they're going to tear through that division and win it. Now, they could win it with 7 or 8 wins, too. Division is pretty weak.
Yeah, that wouldn't shock me. That wouldn't shock me,
Last one, Dallas. I got them at 10.5. Is that what you've got them at?
Yeah, I got 10.5 as well. I think I got to go over that. I think, not a whole lot needs to be said. I mean, we've seen it the last few years. It's what they do. They play really well. We saw it the first week of this season. They do really well during the regular season. They can put some points on the board. That defense is really solid. Diggs is back. Got that pick first week. That's going to get him going a little bit after the injury last week. I think that was great for him. You mentioned Zeke a little bit. I was pretty impressed by him. I was a little shocked. I don't know how much. I assume he lost some weight. I didn't hear that, but I assume he did. He looked a little quicker, a little more spry. Rico doubted, he's supposed to be pretty solid coming up. I know he hasn't gotten a lot of hype, but I think he'll be a nice kind of complement to what Zeke's doing. So yeah, I like what they got obviously offensively. I think those contracts getting done, just whether you say pressure, whatever you want to say, but just to not have to deal with the noise and every time you finish a game, hey, are you going to get paid? Are you mad about not being paid? Like, just to have them done and not worry about that stuff, you can just play. And this isn't Dak's first big contract. Like your point, he was already the highest paid at that point. So it's not like all of a sudden like, hey, you got this huge contract. Can you perform? It's not a Deshaun Watson like, hey, you just set an incredible record after not having played a year, whatever. Are you going to be able to live up to it? He's done it, and he's played solid. Now, obviously, the thing for them is the playoffs. Can they actually make some noise in the playoffs? Can they do anything there? Clearly the question mark. I'm not willing to go that far yet on them, but I think as far as the regular season goes, I like them over 10.5. I like Philly. I think those two teams, the Niners, I know it sounds, again, a little chalky from what we've seen recently, but I think those guys are all ready to come back and make some noise again.
Yeah, I agree with you on Dallas. I think Dallas is going to be solid. I think the NFC East is about the same as it was last year. I think you've got Philly and Dallas are clearly the big dogs, and I think that Washington is really not a whole lot better. And I will see what Jaden Daniels is. I think he's got the makings of a good quarterback, but he's pretty slender, and he takes a lot of hits. So we'll see. And then the Giants are awful. I don't know if you've seen the recent thing going around that since Daniel Jones signed his contract, he's got 2 touchdown passes. You want to guess how many pick sixes he's thrown? 3. So he has thrown more touchdowns to opposing teams than his own team since signing that big contract. So the Giants are in bad shape.
That's brutal.
So I definitely like that pick. Well,
I hate to be super down on the Giants, and some people are, but I could, after seeing what you've seen, it's they're not looking too hot right now.
Yeah, I don't see it improving anytime soon. You got to get a quarterback in there, and Drew Lock isn't the answer either, even though, I think he'd probably be a fun dude to hang out with. I don't think he's the answer at quarterback. So they're in tough shape, but that's our over-under segment. So that's a wrap for the first episode. So if you stayed with us through part 1 and part 2, thank you for listening. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and write your comments. If you've got questions, send them to us. We'll answer them on the next pod. But anything else you want to share with our listeners, Jeff, or any parting words of wisdom?
Lock up the bets that we talked about. Those are locks. Officially, again, not financial advice, but they are locks, so feel free to lock those in. But no, appreciate you listening in, and looking forward to next week.